On superstition. Superstitions, I suppose I thought, were false beliefs, unexamined stories, myths, ways of doing things which other people had. Superstition was a word very much in vogue in the 19th century, particularly in missionary and other circles, to describe other people's belief systems. So the aim of many of the missionary societies, for example, was to go to wherever it was, India, China, Africa, and confront the superstitions, the unfounded beliefs and wrongful attitudes of societies where the missionary had gone. And so it was part of our worldview, which privileges our own. We are not, on the whole, superstitious, though there may be elements in our society which we have to beware of, the working classes or ignorant groups who are superstitious. But we, on the whole, are not. We are rational, scientific, enlightened people, and they are superstitious. One of the great triumphs and successes, often forgotten about in my subject of anthropology, was to debunk a lot of all this. Basically, anthropologists went to societies which before had been written off as superstitious. You looked at the outside, you saw them believing in witchcraft and doing all sorts of strange rituals and carrying on in a way which you thought, well, this is crazy. Don't they know that it's no good doing a rain dance because the rain won't come as a result of that? So the West and others, and it wasn't just the West, each civilization thought other people's views were superstitious. And they went and at moments of dominance, as in the 19th century with the West, you try to clear away the superstitions to make people live in a rational way like yourself, be more like me. And when anthropology grew up in the later 19th century, and particularly when it turned to its fieldwork phase, people went and actually lived in the societies which had been described as superstitious. They learnt the language, which was a big start, and they spent time. They spent a year, 2 years, with the people, and they tried to get inside their thought systems and their social systems, their economic systems. And what on the surface had seemed to be superstitious nonsense, as it was described, they began to see the logic within it. So in a very famous example, which influenced me a lot, the work of Evans Pritchard on Azandi witchcraft. Witchcraft in this North African society looked complete superstition, but when you examine the living conditions of the Azandi, their absence of medicine or Western treatments for things, and the conditions of life, you saw why it was that if some disaster happened, someone was killed by the falling grain storage bin, or someone's child was died of a disease or whatever, what were you to do? Were you just to say, oh, well, it's God? Well, they didn't believe in a God. They had lots of gods, and there was no single, all presiding, all benevolent or mischievous God. You couldn't explain it. And even if you can explain it in practical terms, like there was wood rot in the building that had fallen down, that didn't explain why on that moment someone had been walking under it. So the why questions were not answered. And to believe that in a society where almost everything comes from other human beings, it's a small, close-knit society where food and love and warmth and all sorts of things flow from other human beings. It seemed natural to think that evils like this also came from inside certain malevolent human beings. So it began to be shown in many anthropological studies that what were considered to be superstitious beliefs had a rational foundation, in the sense that if you understood the premises on which people worked and their situation and the function of their beliefs, then their beliefs were not superstitious. You yourself would have thought like that. So it took away much of the arrogance of the West, and when applied back in your own societies, you began to be more careful in your dismissal of things as just superstitious nonsense, because human beings are intelligent and perceptive, and they have reasons for doing things, and even if you can't see what they are to start with. And so you began to examine your own society in that light, and you began to examine yourself, and you began to see that the idea that you were so rational also was fake, or at least untrue, because you yourself have many superstitions. I am no more superstitious, I suppose, than others, but I'm still hesitant to walk under a ladder, partly because I think how ridiculous it would be, having been told by your grandmother not to walk under a ladder. Someone was up there and dropped a pot of paint on you. But basically, there are a number of things when you spill salt or break a mirror or see a black cat or a single magpie. All these popular superstitions that we have in our society, you sort of don't believe them in really, but you think, well, better just avoid all these various things or take heed. And of course, they are confirmed by something that happens with humans. 99 times you see a magpie or an unlucky bird and nothing happens. The 100th time something bad does happen. You forget the 99 times and you think, after all, it was right, that 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy. And so it confirms the superstitions. The other thing about superstitions is that, as the poet said, Eliot, man cannot stand too much reality. We can't just be entirely rational and calculative and live in a pure air of sensible behaviour. We need not just arts and hobbies and many other things. We probably need some superstitions. So they are part of the richness of our lives and a subject of curiosity and investigation. Indeed, a lot of the early anthropologists, well before the discovery of what was happening in other societies, were folklorists who gathered together the superstitions of our own and peasant societies in the West. So superstitions, I think about anyway, what we mean when we say, oh, that's just superstitious nonsense.